as we remember the life and legacy of Michael Ratner, who died at the age of 72 Wednesday of cancer, of complications related to cancer. We have a round table of people remembering Michael's life. He was the longtime president of the Center for Constitutional Rights. In a moment, we'll go to Jules Lobel in Pittsburgh, who took over for Michael. Julian Assange, remembering him from inside the Ecuadorian embassy in London, where Michael went scores and scores of times to meet his client and friend, Julian Assange, who's been holed up there, granted political asylum by Ecuador, but afraid if he steps foot outside, he'll be arrested and ultimately extradited to the United States. Michael Smith is with us, longtime friend, colleague, and co-author of Who Killed Che, and Reed Brody of Human Rights Watch, who wrote the Pinochet Papers with Michael Ratner. Juan?
Well, I'd like to bring in Jules Lobel from Pittsburgh. Jules, you replaced Michael as the head of the Center for Constitutional Rights. Could you talk about his impact on social activism and the law and his model of lawyering?
Yeah, Michael was a role model and inspiration for many lawyers and activists around the world, including myself. I never would have been involved with the center, and I never would have had the career that I did if it wasn't for Michael, who got me involved, urged me to stay involved, and gave me the model of lawyering that I subsequently used. His model, which I think is used by many people now, but which he pioneered in many respects, is threefold. One is he never backed down from a fight against oppression, against injustice, no matter how difficult the odds, no matter how hopeless the case seemed to be, no matter how much there was a lack of precedent. He took cases that nobody else would take for clients that nobody else would represent. You know, whether it was a work in Central America in the 80s where nobody else would take these cases, or the war powers cases, or the Haitian cases that Reed talked about, or the Guantanamo cases. He stood alone in many cases. You know, now you talk about 600 Guantanamo lawyers. When Michael first said to the center, we have to take this case, he was standing alone and the center was standing alone. There weren't 600 lawyers behind him, but he was willing to do that because he was unflinching in the face of oppression and unfearful. I remember in the war powers case when President Bush, the first President Bush, went to war against Iraq, Ron Dellums and 45 congressmen sued, and Ron Dellums told me, we called the center and we called Michael because we knew you guys would do it. We knew that you guys were willing to take on the Bush administration, and we didn't know if anybody else was going to do it, and that's why he called us. But secondly, Michael was brilliant in combining legal advocacy and political advocacy. You know, the clip that you had from Beth Stevens where they brought this case against Gramajo, the former defense minister in El Salvador, and brilliantly, in Guatemala, I'm sorry, and brilliantly sued him by filing the subpoena and the summons while he was graduating from Harvard. Irrespective of what happened legally with the case, Gramajo was finished, because that was the news front page news throughout Guatemala. And when he filed the Guantanamo case, he didn't have a prayer, he didn't think he had a prayer of winning, but he was going to do this to, as Susan Anthony said 100 years ago, keep up the drumbeat of agitation, of political education and agitation against what he thought was an oppressive U.S. policy, and which we now all know was an oppressive U.S. policy. So
Jules,
he was brilliant in combining political activism and legal activism.
I wanted to ask you about his and the center's pioneering work in using this obscure Alien Tort Act to go after international criminals.
Yeah, Peter Weiss and Rhonda Copeland at the center pioneered this. Up until 30 years ago, there had been no suits against foreign dictators, foreign human rights abuses in U.S. courts. U.S. courts said they didn't have jurisdiction. The center, again, without any precedent, stood alone and said, we're going to sue human rights abuses wherever they are in the world. Michael took that up and sued Gramajo, sued dictators around the world. And now there's a whole hundreds of cases following the lead of Michael in the center in using international law and using international human rights in U.S. courts. I just wanted to say one other thing about Michael, and this particularly in international law. He loved people all around the globe. He represented them, met with them, shared their misery, shared their suffering. And one of the things he taught me is to really be with the people, to really go out and meet people, to be compassionate, to be empathetic. And that's why I bet you people all around the globe now are mourning the death of Michael. When I was in Cuba 6 months ago or so, I met with the former foreign minister of Cuba, and the first question he asked me over dinner was, "How's Michael doing?" Because he knew Michael cared about Cuba and the people in Cuba, and he cared about Michael. It was those kind of relationships that Michael built that made him such a remarkable person.
I want to go back to 2006, when Michael Ratner and the Center for Constitutional Rights were awarded the Lennon-Ono Grant for Peace. This was in Iceland. It was filmed by Karen Ranucci, journalist and wife of Michael Ratner. Michael was introduced by Yoko Ono.
As you are well aware, all of us are now living in darkness of fear and confusion in this polluted world, which we ourselves created. But we really don't have to live in such dreams of darkness. It is up to us to switch the channel and walk away from it, and together arrive into the future which is already in our hands. The two important powers we possess will enable us to accomplish this. One is the power of healing, and the other is the power of protective law, which allows us to enjoy individual freedom and collective health. The two recipients of this year's Lennon-Ono Grant for Peace, Doctors Without Borders, Médecins Sans Frontières, and Center for Constitutional Rights, are working on the very thing we need to restore the balance of this planet we love and cherish.
Thank you, Yoko. It's an incredible honor for me, really, as the president of the Center for Constitutional Rights, to receive this honor. It has special significance for us, and of course, a lot of people have said to me, "Hey, Michael, what are you guys going to do with the money?" And I sort of don't want to get Yoko into more trouble than she already is, but one of the things we'll be doing is continuing to represent some 500 men that are in cages at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. And the other thing, which some of you may be aware of, is that the United States, or President Bush, recently pardoned himself and all high-level U.S. officials for war crimes. And that pardon may be operative in the United States, but it's not operative in the rest of the world. And so one thing we're going to do is make this world uncomfortable for some of our officials who engaged in war crimes and torture.
That was Michael Ratner in 2006 in Iceland, as he was awarded by Yoko Ono the Lennon-Ono Grant for Peace. We only have a minute. Your remembrance, your fond remembrances, Reed Brody.
You know, Michael and his wonderful wife Karen were at the center also of a huge progressive community here in New York. Their children, Jake, an activist with Immokalee workers, Anna, performance artist. Each year, the only July 4th softball game in which the Zapatistas played against the eco-socialists, and everybody ended by singing the Internationale. You know, they were the center of a community here.
Michael Smith.
I took a singing class, anyone can sing, with Jake and Anna and Elena, Michael's children, and we put them on FaceTime, and we sang the Internationale. And Michael was in a Barca lounge in his living room. And we sang, "Arise, ye prisoners of starvation, arise, ye wretched of the earth," and so on. And Michael put up his fist and sang it in French.
I want to end with a clip from a video produced by the Ratner family to mark Michael's 60th birthday. Many of his friends were asked to briefly describe him.
Michael is unfaltering.
Tenacious.
Effervescent. A very loyal friend.
Compassionate.
Very decent.
He's relentless. He's fearless.
Generous.
Super kind and warm.
It's got to be some kind of tremendous optimism to keep going at the pace that he goes.
I'm shocked to hear he's this old. I thought he was about 22 myself.
Friends and family remembering Michael Ratner. He died on Wednesday at the age of 72 of complications related to cancer. If you have memories or stories you'd like to share, you can go to Michael Ratner Presente at tumblr.com, and we'll post that online. That does it for our show. Thanks so much to Julian Assange, to Jules Lobel, to Michael Smith, and to Reed Brody. I'll be speaking tonight at Barnes & Noble at Union Square at 7 o'clock. We have job openings for internships and fellows at democracynow.org. Very special thanks to Mike Burke and to Brendan Allen, to Nermeen Sheikh and Carla Wills and Laura Gottesdiener and Dina Guzder and Amy Littlefield and Sam Alcoff and Robbie Karen, Hani Massoud, Sharina Nadura, Juan Carlos Davila, Pedro Rodriguez, Miguel Noguera, Mike DeFilippo. Special thanks to Julie Crosby, Becca Staley, Hugh Grand, David Prude, Ariel Boone, Vesta Godars. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez. Again, our website is democracynow.org, and you can send memories and stories to Michael Ratner Presente at tumblr.com. Thanks so much for joining us.